Hello everybody, how's everyone doing? As for me, I'm doing pretty well. I'm still waiting for an update surrounding the interview that I took last week, so that's that. Anyways, in this video, we'll be talking about Bitcoin and the crypto space in general. Before we saw the huge drop that occurred on Bitcoin back in May, people everywhere were predicting a peak in September. I was also predicting a peak in September because there are numerous models where if we lined up the previous cycles, the estimated month where we would see a peak was in September. Therefore, in this video, we'll be looking at if Bitcoin could make that peak in September, as it is a very volatile asset that can make huge moves towards the upside and the downsides. After that, I'll be going over the usual charts so we can diagnose what the market is feeling and then end the video with a portfolio update. So why did we all think that Bitcoin was going to peak in mid-September? Well, first, Bitcoin was literally climbing straight up between the months of August and March. We did see a few drops here and there, but overall we climbed 500%. Furthermore, we saw these sorts of models posted by multiple people where they were lining the past cycles during their bear market lows. Depending on how people lined the charts up, we saw Bitcoin peaking in some time in September. In this case, we saw Bitcoin peaking in between September 13th and the 15th. Obviously, this does not seem to be correct now because, well, it's already mid-September, and even if we gave the model some leeway, I wouldn't expect Bitcoin making a huge move to the upside in just a couple of days. But you may be asking why I can't see Bitcoin peaking in September. For instance, there are still a couple of days in September, and the models that were on Twitter need to have some leeway. If Bitcoin were to peak at the end of September or already peaked at the beginning of September, I would say confidently that those models that were predicting a middle of September peak were correct. But what would Bitcoin need to do for it to peak in September? This is what we would need to see. Let's just say Bitcoin is going to peak at the $100,000 range. This in itself is a big underestimation, as that will prove that there are significant diminishing returns occurring. But let's just say Bitcoin is going to peak in the $100,000 range. For Bitcoin to do that, Bitcoin would need to move over 100% within 10 days or so, and that kind of price action looks like this blue line. It is basically going straight up, and the angle of the line is like around 80 degrees. Therefore, it's obvious that Bitcoin will be not peaking in September. So what will Bitcoin be doing? Well, to find that out, let's do some technical analysis. This is the Bitcoin's daily chart, and as you can see, we're consolidating right under the $50,000 mark. Furthermore, we seem to have found some support at the 0.236 Fibonacci level. If we switch over to the 1-week chart, we see that the body of this week's candle has found some support on the 20-week moving average. On the other hand, we see that the wick of the candle has found support on the 21-week exponential moving average. Finally, we see that Bitcoin is also above the 8-week moving average. This is pretty bullish, as we're currently holding the 20-week and 21-week moving average as support, as well as being above the 8-week moving average. Overall, as mentioned in the last video, I believe that Bitcoin is in a very strong spot, as it is really just testing some important moving averages before making its move to the upside. The only bearish pattern people are seeing on Twitter are these 5 peaks. If we look at the previous price action, we see that Bitcoin made 4 peaks that were made out of higher highs. However, on the 5th peak, we see that Bitcoin made a lower high. After the 5th peak, we dropped by around 50%. People on Twitter noticed that we were making a similar pattern very recently. As you can see, peak 1 seems to mimic the previous peak 1, as we saw some sort of drop after the first peak. For instance, the second peak seems to be made up of 2 peaks, and the third peak is not as defined as the previous third peak. Even the 4th peak is not that similar as the previous 4th peak, as we saw some sort of dip in the middle. Therefore, there are some obvious differences, but at the same time, past price action does not need to exactly be the same, but it just needs to rhyme. People are suspecting we're at the stage of making the 5th peak, as we were rejected from the $50,000 area multiple times. If this were to be correct, then a 50% drop from here will land us at $24,000. Personally, I do not believe this would happen, as the recent peaks are less defined and they happened within a shorter time period. But once again, it is always important to understand both sides of the trade. Here we have Ethereum. As you can see, we're not doing that well, as we are barely holding the lower green trendline as support. This low green trendline is made up of mostly local lows, even though it was tested as a resistance line in mid-July. Furthermore, it looks like we made a lower low as shown here. But this in itself shouldn't be a huge problem, as Bitcoin is basically doing the same thing. Here we have Ethereum versus the Bitcoin chart. As you can see, we broke out of this triangle and we're heading lower. That is pretty bearish, as it looks like a reversal in the trend, as we were steadily going on an uptrend in August. Since we broke out of the uptrend, it is hard to expect what will happen next. For now, we seem to be consolidating at the 0.382 Fibonacci level. So why were the crypto markets under so much trouble? Well, the SPX completely broke down from the last green line that we were trying to hold as support. This is pretty bearish, as it is a breakdown of the ongoing uptrend. For now, we have found some support at the 0.36 Fibonacci level, but this has caused cryptocurrencies and other assets in general to tank. Many people are attributing this to weakening earnings forecast, some overseas credit problems, and the Federal Reserve verbally stating that they are looking to decrease bond buybacks. The overseas credit problems are an interesting sort of problem. China Evergrande Group is a huge developer, and looks like they seem to be late on their payments to their investors and the bank. They're in charge of large amounts of construction, and it looks like they will stop constructions that have enough floor space to cover 3/4 of Manhattan. This has caused fire sales on the real estate market in China. Obviously, a real estate crash is not ideal, especially during a COVID worry season. The Nasdaq 100 didn't completely break down, but we were really close to. As you can see, we are at the lower bounds of this ascending wedge. This is pretty bearish, as an ascending wedge is a bearish pattern, meaning that we should see a breakdown in price pretty soon. However, for now, we seem to be holding it as support. The DXY had a monstrous move to the upside as shown here. We haven't reached the red trend line yet, but it looks like we'll be getting there pretty soon. Obviously, a higher dollar would put further stress on the markets, but since we're reaching a line of resistance, it should be interesting how the market will move from here. With that all out of the way, let's wrap up this video with a portfolio update. First, we have Bitcoin. I am up 7% in total returns. As mentioned before, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general were having a tough time, mostly due to what was happening with the indexes. However, since we are still net positive, I'm pretty comfortable and don't feel stressed mentally. Here we have Litecoin. As you can see, we're up 13% in total returns. There's not much to say, as all altcoins are looking at Bitcoin very carefully. Finally, we have Ethereum. As you can see, we're up 450% in total returns, which is a significant drop from the last time we covered it. Ethereum seems to be dropping more than Bitcoin, as shown in the Ethereum versus Bitcoin chart. However, I do not have the slightest inkling of selling my Ethereum position, as well as any other crypto position. With that, I'm going to end the video. If you liked this video, press the like button. If you have any questions about this video, leave a comment below. If you want to watch more videos like this, press the subscribe button. This is Books of the Stock Market, and I'll see everyone next week. Thanks.